They are called the rainforests of the sea because of the immense richness and biodiversity they host. Coral reefs are complex structures built up over thousands of years as a result of the deposition of calcium carbonate skeletons of the reef-building coral polyps. Corals are the foundation of a complex system that circulate nutrients through an intricate food web and provide food at all levels of the food chain. But this foundation is challenged by an emerging threat: climate change. Climate change impacts coral in two ways. Firstly, increased seawater temperature, and secondly, ocean acidification. Higher CO2 in the atmosphere increases ocean acidity, making it harder for corals to build their skeletons. But more worryingly, increasing seawater temperatures cause corals to bleach. Bleaching occurs when prolonged, increased sea temperatures cause a breakdown in the relationship between the corals and their symbiotic zooxanthellae algae. The coral subsequently expels the algae, lose their colour and become weak. Some corals are able to recover, but in many cases they die, leading to a gradual deterioration of the whole reef. So, how is Abu Dhabi working to tackle this challenge? The government is working to deliver an economic vision based on sustainable development, enabling sustained economic and social growth, while addressing environmental challenges, including climate change. One of the key ways to combat climate change is to reduce carbon emissions from electricity generation. Nuclear energy will be a critical driver in reducing the UAE's carbon emissions. In fact, the UAE is looking to increase its target for power generation from clean energy sources to 30% by 2030, a substantial portion of which will be supplied by clean electricity from nuclear energy, which produces almost zero carbon emissions whilst generating significant volumes of electricity around the clock.
One of the key considerations that led to the decision to pursue nuclear energy in the UAE was its clear environmental advantage. It is a safe electricity generation technology that does not emit CO2, and therefore it will help the UAE sustain its growth and achieve climate change goals. In fact, when the 4 units of the Barakah plant are operational, the plant will produce up to 25% of the UAE electricity, while preventing the release of 21 million tons of carbon emissions. To give you some context, that is like taking 3.2 million cars off the road each year. Keeping in mind our commitment to sustainability, we designed, built, and will soon operate Barakah nuclear power plant, in line with the highest standards of safety and environmental protection. The development of the Barakah plant has been undertaken in line with strict standards of the Environmental Agency of Abu Dhabi, who have issued the environmental permit and will continue to oversee our environmental performance throughout the operation of the plant. Barakah Nuclear Energy Plant is located in Al Dhafra on the Arabian Gulf. Like all nuclear energy plants, it needed to be built next to a large body of water to provide a cooling source. Because of this coastal location, we were very considerate of our marine environment, which is home to one of the most valuable environmental assets the UAE has: coral reefs. What can be done to help protect them and restore them? One promising technique being developed in a few research labs is coral propagation. So we decided to partner with EAD and Zayed University to further develop and refine this technique and bring it to our region. It was important for us to ensure that the outcome of this study will be sustainable to make a meaningful impact in the future. So we got a number of young Emiratis involved in this project to carry this knowledge and experience forward.
Zayed University was our first choice as we looked for a research partner for this project, as we sought an opening learning environment that encouraged collaboration and opportunities for personal growth and professional development of young Emiratis. We recognize the importance of expert knowledge, but also the ability for knowledge transfer. While the core team has to be specialists in science of coral and marine biology, Equally as important was the keen interest of young Emiratis in helping to drive this project forward. Our young Emiratis are receiving hands-on, sustainable learning opportunities because we know that knowledge transfer does not come purely from reading books or remaining in the lab. The project provides real experience through research, collection of data, and analysis to ensure that in the end, those that will move the project ahead initially are also able to drive forward for a long-term solution. Since we started the project, we have seen significant improvement. Every year, we change the technology and way of working to increase efficiency and drive up the overall experience, which has helped to improve the amount of coral we manage to propagate. We certainly learn what not to do and also establish what went well. Obviously, in order for the project to be successful, it needs to have the potential to be replicated at a cost-effective way and also be scalable. So to make sure we head in the right direction, we looked for experienced scientists. There was also a process of selection based on expertise and working in the field of coral study.
This project is about coral propagation in the Arabian Gulf. With propagation, I mean breeding corals in the laboratory as well as in the ocean. Well, this project was started because coral reefs in the UAE or in Abu Dhabi is under severe threat from things like climate change, pollution, coastal development, overfishing, etc. So there is a need for different tools to try to increase the resilience of these reefs, and the outcomes of this project can hopefully contribute towards that. The main participants are Zayed University as the scientific lead on this project, Nawah as the funder and initiator of the project, as well as Environment Agency as the governmental entity and advisor. So Zayed University is the scientific lead where we are conducting the experiments both in the lab and doing the field work, whereas Nawah is the funder and initiator of this project. And as such, they've been very supportive and actively participating both with advice as well as with manpower.
So the main goals are twofold. So the first one is to show that we can use sexual reproduction as a means to restore coral reefs. And by this I mean being able to produce thousands and potentially millions of coral babies and coral juveniles, and then basically plant those out onto the reef. This requires a little effort. I mean, it requires bringing in some colonies that can be used as the parent colonies, and then waiting for them to spawn and collecting the gametes from them, and then fertilizing the gametes, raising the larvae, and eventually settling them into small blocks that we can then outplant on the reef. Okay, so the advantage of this approach is that it can produce potentially millions of corals that can be outplanted, and it has very little impact on the reef because we only need a few donor colonies that we can maintain, as we have done in this aquarium over the last year, in fact. And the other main advantage of this approach is that it maintains the genetic diversity of the offspring that we produce, because they have all been produced by sexual reproduction means. So we've had a few issues, of course, like most big projects of this kind. One of the big challenges was adapting a laboratory here at Zayed University that we could use to rear corals long term, but we've actually been very successful, and we've managed to keep corals here for over a year, and some of those corals are spawning this year. But that was a challenge in the beginning, establishing a laboratory that was stable enough to be able to maintain water quality and keep corals happy. Okay. The other big challenge we've had is just with environmental conditions in the reefs that we're using to grow our corals. Unfortunately, a couple of years ago, we had a big bleaching event in 2017, and that killed a lot of the fragments that we had growing out of the reef, and a lot of the juveniles that we had outplanted. And we're also facing some challenges with water quality and with having some of our trees and our tables damaged by other vessels that have been unaware that there's a project going on in the reefs that we're using. I mean, restoration is a hot topic at the moment, and it needs to be because corals around the world are facing a lot of challenges, mainly from issues stemming from climate change. So our oceans are getting warmer, and they're also getting a bit more acidic, which is creating issues for corals all around the world. And now that has led to a bit of traction in restoration projects in different parts. There's a few going on in the Caribbean. There's some that are starting in Australia. This, I believe, is the first project of its kind in the UAE, in the sense that it's trying a sexual reproduction approach in addition to a fragmentation approach. So I do believe this is a unique project for the region.
Well, the solutions has to be manifold, because this is a very complex problem, which is on a global scale. It's not only here in the Arabian Gulf and UAE and Abu Dhabi that we have problems with the coral reefs. It's a global issue. And to solve this, we of course need to address the core of the problem, which is climate change, pollution, overfishing, etc. And this project is just one part of the solution that can help restore reefs. And that has to go hand in hand with things like establishing marine protected areas and other restoration efforts. Well, the benefits of this project has been that we managed to develop some novel techniques, how to breed coral in the laboratory, and also understanding how to grow corals in the ocean, where it's best to place them, how to grow them. And on top of that, we also transferred a lot of the knowledge gained in this project to UAE nationals and to other stakeholders involved in this project. Well, yes, there's been a couple of those moments, and I think the first one was the first time we managed to spawn the corals in the laboratory, where you actually we brought in the parent colonies, and we weren't sure if they were going to spawn at all, or if they were going to be stressed or somehow prevented from spawning. But right enough, at a certain given time in the evening, all the corals started spawning, and that was a fantastic feeling. And then we, of course, kept the corals for another year in the laboratory. And yet again, we had another moment when we realized that even after a year in the laboratory, the corals still kept their rhythm, and they actually spawned again simultaneously with the corals in situ. We need to publish some of the exciting results we got, both in scientific literature as well as in popular literature. So that's the first part. And secondly, we hope to continue and to refine the techniques for coral propagation in the future, so we can help restore Abu Dhabi reefs.
While this research is still in its early stages, it has so far given us a good idea about what can be achieved when stakeholders cooperate to tackle an important issue. Coral propagation can support wider conservation efforts, such as establishing marine protected areas where corals can thrive outside the influence of local pressures. We also need to adopt more sustainable fishing methods and perhaps use artificial reefs to take some of the pressure off the natural reefs. Addressing the global challenge facing corals will likely need creativity, ingenuity, and a collaboration at a global scale. We can all play a role in addressing this challenge.